Hello and welcome back. We're going to skip the normal intro and the song and dance that we do because something major has happened in college football today. Arch Manning has committed to the University of Texas. That just broke not too long after I'm recording this, so I figured let's get an emergency pod and let's get my initial reactions to the whole deal. If you don't know, Arch Manning was a five-star recruit in the 2023 draft class or recruiting class. He will be going to the Texas Longhorns, and if you can't put it together by the last name, he is a member of the Manning bloodline. So Eli, Peyton, Cooper, you might know him from his analyst and comedy roles within, I believe, Fox Sports. And Archie Manning, who he is named after, being the Saints quarterback from the distant past. And it's really weird. Like, this is not what I expected this recruiting process to be. I did not expect it to turn out to Texas, but in the about the hour that it has passed, I've started to make heads or tails of it, and I actually think it was a really smart decision by Arch. And let me tell you why. For one, the move to the SEC. We know it's supposed to be in 2025, but I don't know how strong that is, because I believe Texas and OU could likely buy themselves out a year or two early, which would happen to put itself, if they buy it out a year early, that's either Archie or Arch's redshirt freshman year or his true sophomore year, depending. If they buy themselves out 2 years early, it's as soon as he gets in. So there's a chance, or no, there's a guarantee that he plays SEC football at some point, or is at least in college when that move happens. But the big question is, why Texas when you've got LSU, Alabama, Georgia, etc.? I think that is all pretty simple. LSU, that could as simply be, I'm not that big on Brian Kelly, and you call it a day, because we've seen his weird fake Southern accent stuff and all that. Like, I can imagine recruits being a little bit tentative to hitch their wagon to him, especially one with such high value as Arch Manning has. The NIL stuff is obviously going to be a big driver. Texas has a boatload of NIL money. The state, we just saw it with Texas A&M landing that top recruiting class. Odds are a lot of that NIL money inspired a lot of those signings. But think about it like this. If it comes down to Georgia, Alabama, and Texas in the process, because I don't think he was truly considering Clemson or Virginia, who are rumored to be in the race. If it comes down to those three for you, would you rather go to Georgia, where you're going to get big football? You're going to be in a big program, but I would argue Texas and Alabama football is a bigger deal historically than Georgia, and I can imagine that played quite a bit of a factor in there. So let's say you're down to those two. Do you feel confident that Nick Saban is going to be your head coach through all of your years at college? If you don't get in till next year, next summer, you have to do 3 years. I mean, how truly safe do you feel placing that bet right now? I know we've been saying Nick Saban's retiring within 2 years for the last decade now, but at this point, I think that if he had enough meetings with them, I'm sure he probably could have gotten a decent enough gauge on if Nick Saban was sticking around or if he was close to retirement. I would be willing to bet that was a big key factor in all this. Texas, there's nothing could be bigger than Texas moving to the SEC with Arch Manning and being really, really good. Nothing could be bigger than that. I think that could rival current Alabama football as far as TV numbers and general eyes and public opinion. If Arch Manning is who we think he is, and who that last name suggests he is, moving to Texas is probably his best bet. He is the biggest college football player we have seen, or incoming college football player that we have seen in a very long time. As far as general hype and stuff, I don't know that I have ever seen somebody enter with as much focus as he has. I mean, everybody has been talking about where he's going to be recruited for 2 years now, and he is just now becoming a senior. We've been talking about it since he was a freshman or a sophomore in high school. As a whole, I like this move. The more I think about it, I do truly like this move for him. It's such a different approach than what I would have expected. I really did think he was going to LSU. I don't know, like I said, I don't know if Brian Kelly's ways, so to say, have deterred that from happening. But we knew he wasn't going to Ole Miss, despite the family. Tennessee wasn't getting him. That just left Virginia, Clemson, Georgia, LSU, Alabama, and Texas. And if they can bump up and make this work and get him as a starting SEC quarterback by his true sophomore or redshirt freshman year, I think that is going to be the biggest program in the face of college football. One thing that is kind of interesting to me right now is Quinn Ewers transferring into Texas. He'll still have eligibility by the time Arch gets here, and if Texas messes him up, if Sarkisian can't figure it out with Quinn Ewers, who is again another massive quarterback prospect, what happens? What goes through Arch's head? Does he recommit? Does he transfer portal? Does he stick it out and trust that his talent is more present and will transcend whatever Texas has messed up? I think my bet would be that he stays just because of how much the process already was on him. I can't imagine that process was easy for him, especially when you look at the fact that it had been going on for so ridiculously long. But Quinn Ewers will truly get to be a guinea pig for Arch, and if he goes off and explodes and becomes the superstar college football player and leaves in a year or two, then yeah, absolutely. I think now you have put yourself in a great position. Texas will hopefully move to the SEC early, and it gives precedent to redshirt, which means your first or first college football snap could be in the SEC if they find a way out of the Big 12 early enough. So, as a whole, for who was left, I think Texas was probably the smartest decision. I don't know. He might single-handedly save Sarkisian, or he might be helping pick a new head coach by 2024, 2025, whatever it is. And that's fine too. If he gets to help out in that process, or, they at least hear his thoughts, and maybe that does move the needle a little bit, he could become the guy who decides what Texas football looks like moving forward. And for, an 18, 19, 20-year-old kid at that point in time, that is massive. But that's the price you pay to get Arch Manning in the building. One other big factor was the fact that they signed his friend from high school. I'm forgetting his name actually here. Will Randall. He was a 3-star tight end. They're friends from everything I've seen. And he signed to Texas, I want to say, this past week. That should have been a bigger deal than it was. I admittedly did not think it was that big of a deal whenever I read it. I was like, okay, they got a tight end. He knows Arch, but I'm not going to go out and say that this shifts his recruiting process. I should have looked into that a lot more, and I will be the first to admit that me kind of brushing over that was not the smartest thing by me, because maybe that could have been the thing to help predict and kind of get my thoughts a little bit more in order. If you can't tell, I'm a little scrambled right now, strictly because it is such a massive deal. I don't even particularly love talking about guys that aren't draft eligible on this podcast. I would prefer for it to be guys who are close to making that transition and could be impacting the NFL very soon. Arch won't have that, but what's happening affects the entirety of college football, which in turn does affect a lot of these draft eligible guys and will continue to affect draft eligible guys. So what do you think about Arch Manning's landing spot? Do you think it was a smart move by him? Do you think it was questionable? Like, where do you fall in this? I'm really interested to see, whether in the comment section or on my Twitters. Both of those will be linked. This is the end of the emergency pod. If more breaks out, I will likely do another one. I might just throw it in there with the Saturday episode as well. But for now, that is the end of this From My Perspective podcast, and thank you so much for watching. As always, I'll see you next time.